The rain did not fall so much as it was dragged out of the sky by the gravity of the hollow, a heavy, gray curtain that smelled of wet wool and ancient, sour mud. Caleb watched the windshield wipers of his sedan fight a losing battle against the deluge, the rubber squealing rhythmically like a dying animal. He had been driving for 18 hours, running on gas station, coffee, and the adrenaline of a man who knows looking in the rearview mirror is a mistake. He needed sleep. His body, a map of scars and stiff joints earned from a life spent surviving bad decisions and worse people, was beginning to fail him. The neon sign ahead flickered with the erratic pulse of a failing heart. The Blackwood Motor Court. The M and O were burnt out, leaving only Torcourt, a nonsensical warning in buzzing red. He pulled into the gravel lot. It was empty save for a rusted pickup truck that looked as though it had grown out of the earth rather than parked upon it. The surrounding woods pressed in close, the pines towering and oppressive, their branches interwoven like skeletal fingers, blocking out the sky. This was deep country, forgotten country, the kind of place where maps were merely suggestions and cell service went to die. The office smelled of stale tobacco and loam. The clerk was a thin man with skin the texture of parchment and eyes that seemed to have seen too many winters and not enough springs. He didn't ask for a credit card. He didn't ask for a license. He just took the crumpled cash. Caleb slid across the scarred counter and handed over a heavy brass key attached to a piece of driftwood. 213. The clerk wheezed, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. End of the row, nearest the tree line. Quiet there. Quiet is good, Caleb muttered, snatching the key. Quiet is loud if you listen hard enough, the clerk replied, turning his back to rearrange a shelf of dust-covered ceramic figurines that looked vaguely like distorted animals. Caleb stepped back out into the rain. Room 213 was indeed at the far end, separated from the rest of the unit by a breezeway that had collapsed years ago, leaving a gap of jagged concrete and rebar. The door was swollen with humidity and required a shoulder check to force open. Inside, the room was a time capsule of misery. The carpet was a shade of brown that suggested it had once been green, patterned with geometric shapes that seemed to shift in the peripheral vision. The wallpaper was peeling in long, sunburned strips, revealing dark, moldy plaster beneath. It smelled of bleach, trying to mask the scent of something sweet and rotting like flowers left too long on a grave. Caleb threw his duffel bag on the bed. He checked the window lock. Secure. He checked the bathroom. Empty, though the faucet dripped with a maddening plink, plink, plink. He checked under the bed. Just dust bunnies and discarded bottle cap. He was safe. For tonight. He sat on the edge of the mattress, the springs groaning in protest. He needed to stash his emergency cash, a habit from years of sleeping in places where waking up with your throat intact was a luxury. He pulled the nightstand drawer out. It stuck halfway. He yanked it, harder than necessary, and the entire drawer came free, spilling a Gideon Bible and a few dead moths onto the floor. Caleb cursed, kneeling to shove the drawer back in. That was when he saw it. Taped to the underside of the drawer, hidden from casual view, was a thick, leather-bound bundle. It wasn't a single book, but 3 moleskin journals lashed together with twine. Curiosity, the fatal flaw of every survivor, pricked at him. He cut the twine with his pocket knife. The leather was cold to the touch, damp and slick. He opened the first one. The handwriting was erratic, a frantic scrawl of blue ballpoint ink that pressed so hard it tore the paper in places. The roots are moving in the walls, the first page read. I can hear them drinking. Caleb frowned. He flipped forward. I tried to leave. The car won't start. The man at the desk, the one with the soil under his fingernails, he just laughed. He said, the harvest isn't done. I am the harvest. Caleb snorted. Junkie, he muttered. He checked the date at the top of the entry. November 14th, 2024. Caleb froze. The blood in his veins turned to slush. He checked his watch. He checked the date on his phone, though he had no signal. Today was October 9th, 2024. A joke, he whispered to the empty room. Some kids messing around. But the sweat prickling his hairline wasn't laughing. He turned the page. November 15th, 2024. They came through the floorboards last night. Not men, not animals. Things made of woven wicker and old bone. They took my left hand. I cauterized it on the radiator. It smells like pork. I can't scream anymore. The woods are inside the room now. Caleb dropped the book on the bed. He stood up, pacing the small length of the room. The air felt heavier now, charged with static. The smell of rot was stronger. He looked at the radiator. It was cold, rusted, covered in dust. There was no blood. No sign of a struggle. He picked up the second journal. The handwriting was different, elegant, looping cursive, written in black fountain pen. December 2nd, 2024. The geometry of this room is wrong. I measured the walls. The north wall is 3 feet longer than the south, but they meet at 90-degree angles. It's a mouth. We are in the throat. I hear the other guests screaming in the walls, but there is no one next door. The breezeway is broken. I am alone with the scratching. December 3rd, 2024. I looked in the mirror and my eyes were gone, replaced by knots of wood. I tried to gouge them out, but my fingers are twigs. I am becoming the furniture. I am becoming the motel. Caleb's hands were shaking. He grabbed the third book. This one was different. The cover was stained dark, stiff with dried fluid. He opened it. The handwriting was familiar. It was a jagged, blocky print. The letters leaned to the left. It was his handwriting. He dropped the book as if it were burning coal. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He backed away until his back hit the door. "No," he said. "No, that's impossible." He looked at his hands. They were trembling, scarred, dirty, but they were his. He looked around the room. The wallpaper seemed to be breathing now, the peeling strips undulating like gills. He lunged for the book. He had to know. He tore it open to the first entry. October 10th, 2024. That was tomorrow. The rain won't stop. Caleb is here. He thinks he's awake. He thinks he checked in, but he's been here for years. We all have. The survivor. That's what he calls himself. But you can't survive the soil. The soil takes what it is owed. "I didn't write this," Caleb shouted. The sound died instantly, absorbed by the damp walls. He read on. He tries to leave at 3 a.m. He gets in the car. The engine turns over. He feels relief. Then the roots come up through the floorboards of the sedan. They wrap around his ankles. They pull him down, not out of the car, but through it, into the earth beneath the gravel. Caleb slammed the book shut. He grabbed his duffel bag. He didn't care about the money. He didn't care about the rain. He yanked the door handle. It didn't budge. He unlocked the deadbolt. He twisted the knob. It spun freely, disconnected from the latch. He threw his shoulder against the wood. It was like hitting solid stone. He kicked it, screaming, the wood splintering, but revealing only dark, wet earth behind the veneer instead of the breezeway. He ran to the window. He pulled the curtains back. There was no parking lot, no neon sign, no car. Just a wall of woven branches, thick and impenetrable, pressed tight against the glass. The woods hadn't just moved closer, they had swallowed the building. Caleb backed away, hyperventilating. He scrambled for his pocket knife, flicking the blade out. "Who's doing this?" he roared, spinning in a circle. "Show yourself!" Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound came from the bathroom. Caleb approached the door, the knife trembling in his grip. The dripping faucet had stopped. He kicked the door open. The bathroom was pristine, but in the mirror, Caleb saw himself. But the reflection wasn't holding a knife. The reflection was holding a pen. The reflection was sitting at the small desk in the bedroom, writing in a journal. Caleb looked back at the bedroom. The desk was empty. He looked back at the mirror. The reflection stopped writing and looked up. Its eyes were black pits filled with soil. It smiled, and its teeth were jagged stones. "You have to finish the entry, Caleb," the reflection's voice whispered, not from the mirror, but from inside Caleb's own skull. "The cycle needs ink." "I'm not crazy," Caleb gritted out. "I'm the survivor. I survive." "Survival is just a delayed meal," the voice purred. The floorboards beneath Caleb's feet gave a wet, cracking sound. He looked down. Sap thick, amber, and smelling of ancient pine was oozing up between the cracks in the carpet. It was sticky, rising fast. He tried to lift his foot, but his boot was glued to the floor. He slashed at the floor with his knife, but the blade snapped against the wood as if it were iron. The room began to elongate. The ceiling stretched upward, disappearing into shadow. The peeling wallpaper fell away, revealing not plaster, but bark. The motel room was shedding its skin, revealing the hollowed-out heart of a massive, ancient tree. Caleb struggled, pulling his foot out of his boot, then the other. He scrambled onto the bed. The bedspread was dissolving, turning into moss. The pillows were becoming stones. He looked at the nightstand. The journals were glowing with a faint, sickly phosphorescence. He realized then that the handwriting hadn't been his. He had been shaping his hand to match the writing for years, or minutes. Time had no meaning in the belly of the wood. He grabbed the third journal. He didn't know why. It was instinct. If he could change the words, maybe he could change the reality. He found the pen, a heavy brass fountain pen that he didn't remember owning, lying on the mossy mattress. He opened the book to the final page. October 11th, 2024. The page was blank. "I write the end," Caleb gasped, the air in the room growing thin, smelling of ozone and wet fur. "I write that I leave. I write that I burn this place down." He pressed the pen to the paper, but his hand wouldn't move the way he wanted. The muscles in his arm spasmed, controlled by something else, something that lived in the marrow of his bones, something he had inhaled with the damp air of the hollow. He watched in horror as his hand began to move, dragging the pen across the paper in jagged, violent strokes. "Caleb realizes the truth," his hand wrote. He was never the survivor. He was the carrier. He brought the meat to the roots. "Stop it!" he screamed, grabbing his right wrist with his left hand, trying to wrench the pen away. But his left hand betrayed him too, pushing the right hand down harder, forcing the ink into the fibers of the paper. "The room isn't a room. It is a stomach, and digestion has begun." A vine, thick as a python and covered in thorns, burst from the television screen. It wrapped around Caleb's waist. He didn't feel pain, only a terrible, numbing cold. Another vine dropped from the light fixture, looping around his neck. He was being hoisted up. The pen remained in his hand, glued to his flesh. He looked at the journal one last time. The date seemed to shimmer and change. October 9th, 2024. It wasn't the future. It was now. The journals weren't prophecies. They were scripts, and he was just the actor who had finally stepped onto the stage. As the vines tightened, crushing the breath from his lungs, Caleb saw the floor of the room dissolve completely. Beneath was not a foundation, but a writhing pit of thousands of other journals, thousands of other travelers, their bones interlocked to form the roots of the Blackwood. His vision grayed. The last thing he felt was the pen moving one final time, guided by the twitching spasms of his dying nerves. "He makes a fine fertilizer," he wrote. "The soil is pleased." The pen dropped. Caleb's body went slack, swaying gently in the damp, stagnant air of room 213, waiting for the moss to cover him, waiting for the next traveler to find the book he had just finished writing. Outside, the rain stopped. The neon sign flickered once, buzzing loudly, before the red light died completely, leaving the hollow in total, consuming darkness.